Hello, students. You were the first to try this new experimental way of doing PowerPoint slides for costume history. I'm going to try a narration. We're going to see how that goes. So bear with me. I'm going to do the introduction of terms. I'm going to do it in two sections, part one and part two, so the file sizes won't be too big. So let's go ahead and get beginning. Oh, by the way, get started. I'll probably go pretty fast on this, so bear with me. Hello, and welcome to part two of this introductory lecture on in costume history. We just finished with the cellulosic or plant-based fibers. Now we're going to concentrate on protein fibers, which are fibers, material made from animal hairs and animal furs. Excuse me. The most common of these are wool and silk. We'll talk a little bit later about some specialty animal hairs and then the subcategory of animal hides, aka leather. Sorry, a little pony in my throat. Wool. Oldest fabric used by humans as far as we know. It is made from the fleece of sheep. It is sheared, then combed and carded, straightened out, and then spun into yarn. Sheep are tough. Sheep are hardy critters and can be raised about anywhere. Historically, England has been the leader in wool. It's been a main staple of their economy for most of their history. But today, everybody can produce wool. You can go sheep anywhere. It's strong, it's elastic, it's water repellent, it's flame resistant, natural insulation, really good in cold climates, can be shaped, and is an excellent tailoring fabric. So that is wool. Also of equal fascination is silk, which comes from the cocoon of the silkworm, which is spun by the silkworm larva. First cultivated in China 4,000 years ago. The story goes there's an empress having tea in her garden under a tree, under a mulberry tree, and wouldn't you know it, a cocoon falls out of the tree and drops right into the cup, into her tea. The heat from the tea starts to unravel the silk from the cocoon, and that is how the fibers of silk were supposedly discovered. Today, it's in Asia, India, France, Italy. The largest producer of silk is Japan. Probably the leader in quality in fashion is Italy. It is an amazing fiber. As you can see, what happens is once the cocoon is spun, the larva is killed by heat, and then the filament is unraveled very painstakingly. They have machines now that are much better at doing that. But you can get a single filament that is 300 to 1,600 yards long. So it is a time-consuming process. That's why one of the reasons silk is so expensive. It also requires an enormous amount of leaves to produce silk. It's estimated that 200 pounds of mulberry leaves are needed to produce 1 pound of silk. Fortunately, they're very light, so a pound is a pretty hefty amount of silk. It is light, it is lustrous, it can be a beautiful fabric. It absorbs moisture incredibly well and still feel dry, so it's a really good warm weather material. It also feels good against the skin, and it is the strongest of the natural fabrics. So it is, even though it is lightweight, it is very tough to break. So it has a lot of lasting qualities, and it can stretch up to 20% of its original length. So it is fascinating. If you're worried about silkworms, don't be too much. Let's see, we need a picture of the little feller. There we go. This is a silkworm right here. So don't worry too much about larvae killing off. They keep enough domesticated rays to keep the supply coming. And if you look at this little moth wearing a winter coat, it would become no surprise that it does not fly. So there's a very good chance silkworms would have become extinct long ago if it weren't for the intervention of humans. So that's one place where we help. Yay! Cute little silkworms. Just as an aside, I wanted to bring up spider silk. Even though that's not really a fabric, it can be used to stitch. Spider silk is kind of the holy grail of the textile industry. Here you see this is a large tapestry about 20 feet high. Yeah, I would say about 20 feet high. That was made in Madagascar out of spider silk. It is impossible to farm, really, because you have to milk spiders to get the silk. You have to coax it out of their little abdomen rear ends. which is not easy. And also, spiders eat each other, so you can't keep them enough. It's hard to keep a spider farm. So it's really not practical. This was done by a millionaire in Madagascar, which took over 4 years and over 1 million spiders to harvest. He just wanted to see if he could do it. Now, what's so fascinating is it is the strongest natural fabric in the world, and synthetic fabrics don't even come close. It is strong as steel. This cloth here, made out of this lustrous spider silk, is bulletproof. Kevlar is kind of the closest that we've come to creating a synthetic spider silk, but even that is not as strong. So when you see Spider-Man jump around and pulling trains off tracks and so forth with spider silk, that part is pretty close to the truth. There's nothing stronger. So it's fascinating. So that is the Holy Grail, is making something that's easier to produce, but just as strong as spider silk. It would change the industry. Okay, moving on. Just a couple of other animal hair fiber. Interesting. Alpaca, South American camel with a lustrous fleece. There is prized for its quality and expensive. Angora, a goat that has a soft, silky hair fiber, also known as mohair. Angora rabbit, which is used for gloves, hats, so forth. I put the one in the middle. This is she Angora. It's a weird one. I don't know why I put it in there. It's fibers taken from dog hair or cat hair. It's basically pet. It's very rare. It's kind of creepy, but if you have a pet that sheds and you save up all your hair, all the hair, there are places on the internet that will take that hair and spin it into yarn for you. So Fido or little checkers there can live forever as a coat or shawl. Camel hair, Bactrian. You can see down at the bottom right there is, I will outline it here because I got these nifty outline tools. A long-haired Mongolian camel. So camel hair, also expensive. Will make tan to reddish brown. Is a beautiful natural color to that. The Cashmere Goat, to make cashmere fabric. Similar to wool, but so much softer and finer. Llama and Peruvian, you can see here in the center there, who is partly sheared. They don't mostly shear the midsection and not the haunches and the neck because it's cold in the Peruvian highlands there. And also a lustrous, warm, usually brown or black. And at the bottom you see the vicuña from Peru, is considered one of the most expensive fabrics. It is the softest, is the warmest, and the lightest. Easy to texture, looks beautiful when woven. That makes it one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive fabric on earth. And one of the reasons is because it is so hard to cultivate. Vicuñas are mean as fire. They are just awful, high-strung creatures, so it's hard to shear them. And a lot of times the vicuña will fight so much that it will die while being sheared. So that makes it prized and also a really difficult job to take care of. Just to give you an idea, here's a couple of prices. This is from about 3 years ago, but those fine things that we were talking about, like the Cashmere Goat, Cashmere Cape there for $4,880. There's a vicuña shawl for $1,575. That's just the shawl itself there, the little drapey part. And it is over $1,500. So, subcategory, real quick, I was talking about animal hides. So, the outside is called leather, and the inside is called suede. Leather is made soft and pliable by a process called tanning. It can be made leather. Now, leather is not just cowhide or pig, called pigskin, or it could be sheep. It can be any kind of thing, alligator. They're all leather. It just means hide. Suede, if you have suede, then it's a soft, kind of here in the center, you see this is a suede where it has a soft nap to it. So that's the inside of the leather of the skin. And if you keep the hair on that, there, with the hair on, that's a Sherpa. Sherpa is not just a person, it's a type of tanning there, with the hair still on the hide. Okay, so those are the types of fabrics. Really quick, we're going to do some helpful costuming terms, which will help you with your journey through the history of fashion and costuming. Yarn versus thread. Thread and yarn are mainly interchangeable. Thread is very thin. Yarn is thicker. They're made by interlocking fibers made of plies. Yarn is made of plies of thread. So thread is thin, yarn is thicker. You twist them together in a process called spinning to make a long, continuous strand of material. And there you go. That's what you get. You get yarn, thread, and there's two ways to turn it into fabric. One way is weaving, and the other is knitting. Weaving, the process used to make cloth by interlacing two sets of yarn at right angles, known as the warp and weft threads. So what happens is you have warp threads held on a loom, tied on a loom. Loom, not a loon. Loom's a bird. You don't put that on a bird. That's a loom. You take the weft threads, or warp threads, excuse me, right here, these vertical ones, and you tie them on to the loom, and then by some means, which we will see some later, you will take weft thread, weft yarn, and interweave it into in between the warp. And there you have weaving. It's that simple. Time-taking, or taking a lot of time, painstaking, sure, but very effective. So here you see a weave. There are three fundamental types: plain, twill, and satin. A plain weave is just that. You put the warp threads down, you interlace the weft threads in between, and you get a very simple pattern. This is a piece of burlap, so it's pretty fine. Now, how good is the fabric is determined by the thread count. So when you hear people talk about, I have a 600 thread count sheets and pillowcases, they're bragging because it's a higher thread count. That means the quality is better, it's finer. And that's the number of total threads in a square inch of fabric. So the higher the count, the better the quality. Okay, some others real quick. Twill is a diagonal pattern. You kind of see here at the bottom, right? If you look here, you can see under 1, under 2, over 2, under 2, over 2. So it makes this sort of diagonal ribbed pattern. Denim and chino are two examples of twill. So if you have denim pants on, you can look and you can see the sort of ribbed diagonal. It gives it more stretch and more fit if you do a twill. And it makes this sort of diagonal pattern. You see here, this is called the wale, W-A-L-E. Also, it doesn't show dirt as easily as a plain weave. It allows for freer move. That's why jeans are made of denim, because it doesn't show the dirt if you get them dirty, and for running and moving around in modern society, much better wear and tear. Satin, type of weave with a glossy surface and a dull back. So satin in itself is not a fabric. It is a way of weaving. It's a weaving term. The warp thread is dominant, and there are very few interlacing. So look at the pattern down here. You can see, here's the warp peeking out there. Excuse me, I'm sorry, this is a cross. This is a sideways. So these are the warps here. My apologies. I should know my own illustrations. And you can see under, over a little bit. Lots under here, over a little bit. And what that does is that gives it a shiny surface, particularly with silk. So you get a shiny, smooth surface. One side is usually a dull side. The other side, like this, is going to be the shiny one. Expensive, lustrous, beautiful. Not a lot of texture there, or not a lot of structure. So fairly delicate. That's why you need something like silk, which is strong. It's strong enough to handle that sort of way of weaving. So that's why it's such a popular satin subject, I guess, fabric. On the bias, you might have heard that term. Woven fabrics generally have a bias, which is the cross grain at 45-degree angle to the warp and weft thread. So basically this line right here. There. Generally, it's more elastic. So garments that are cut on the bias tend to accentuate body curves. They're elastic and they drape gracefully and they fit well. You can see here this wedding dress. Cut on the bias, how it hugs the body in a flattering way. Knitting is also, if you're wearing a t-shirt right now, you look down, you're seeing knitting. Now with machines, but basically two interlocking loops of yarn with two large threads. So there's no straight line. You look down here, you can see loop, 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 loop them together. This is the Stockinette pattern. And what that does is create inverted V-shaped rows. The good thing about knitting is the stretch. Good wear and tear. They're interlocked, so they're tight and they're tough, but they move well, they stretch well. That's why when you wear, one reason, there are some other reasons, but one reason when you're wearing a t-shirt that's fairly tight and you flap your arms up and down, which you probably shouldn't do anyway in public, but if you do, you're not going to tear the underside of your shirt because of the elasticity, because it is knitted. And modern knitting machines are relatively inexpensive and easy to do, so anybody can make a t-shirt. There. Example t-shirt there. If you've never seen a t-shirt, that's what it looks like. Okay, quickly, lastly, some common garments. Well, second to lastly, one little last thing after this. You should know tunic, which is basically a piece of fabric, usually pinned or sewn on one side, opening for arms, head, and arms. A slip-on garment, right, which is a draping. Then it's usually belted, and it's open at the bottom. So, a cloak is an outer garment that is draped around the shoulders and clasped at the neck, with or without a hood and collar. Almost always extends to the ankle. Shorter than a cloak is the cape or mantle, which barely goes past the waist. Skirt, very simple. These are just things. These are common terms that you're going to crop up during class. And as simple as a piece of fabric that encircles the waist and covers the leg. There you go. A draped garment. Gown or robe. I don't have a picture of it here, but that's pretty easy. Loose flowing garment, sleeved, extends to the ankle. Close sewn, which you slip over your head, or open sewn, which you put on like a jacket. Okay. Now, just a quick epilogue. If we have time, if I can get to it, I will show you. During this class, I think we will have Spring 2021 Fashion Week in New York, London, Paris, and Milan, and I'll give you some images of those. But this is where modern fashion is. It's in two parts, I guess two categories. The first is ready to wear, RTW, prêt-à-porter, as it's known in Paris, which is fashion that is meant to be worn. Obviously. Well, what other kind is there? Well, I'll show you in a moment. You can see, like at Lanvin there on the left, a nice satin silk weave on her sheath dress. Still doing it. The other type is haute couture, which is not really, when people look at these fashion shows and they shake their heads and, no, what are you doing? I'm not going to wear that. Well, no, you're not. It's not meant to be worn by people. It's meant to show off the skills of the designer, the skills of the shop that made the clothes, the skills of the accessorized, people who make the accessories, hair, and makeup. It's a showcase. So haute couture is not meant to be worn. It's meant to be admired and dazzled and shake your head or whatever. It's to provoke a reaction. But couture is not really ready to wear. This is from the late, great genius Alexander Mcqueen, who took his own life about 10 years ago, who was a master of couture, and also of turning couture into ready to wear. So, and I think, yeah, this was a question that I posed in classes. Which is couture and which is ready to wear? Pret-a-porter, obviously the one on the left, Limifu, is ready to wear. And, of course, Alexander Mcqueen again in a couture piece. Again, couture, ready to wear. Ready to wear on the left, couture on the right. Kind of a French peasant girl look there, or Alice in Wonderland. Hello, students. You were the first to try this new experimental way of doing PowerPoint slides for costume history. I'm going to try a narration. We're going to see how that goes. So bear with me. I'm going to do the introduction of terms. I'm going to do it in two sections, part 1 and part 2, so the file sizes won't be too big. So let's go ahead and get beginning. Oh, by the way, get started. I'll probably go pretty fast on this, so bear with me.